is going on all? Hopefully audio and everything is good. I want to thank everyone for your patience in getting everything going here as we kick off some Just Scrappin'. 2 nights a week of streaming. Wednesday you guys are pretty familiar with. That's going to be challenges, narrated play, chat participation. But here on Thursdays, we're going to do it differently. I think we're just going to let you guys figure it out. In the meantime, my first guest is Ryan Powell. And Ryan was... Sorry, let me get the audio here. When I decided I wanted to do this show, I had one person in mind for my first guest, and that is Ryan Powell. Ryan, how the heck are you?
I'm very well, thank you, Matt. Thank you for having me on, and thank you for correctly identifying that I have a face for radio and not for television.
Now, the plan here was, of course, to have Ryan on with video. Here on the first episode, Ryan and I did not quite get together soon enough to make that happen correctly. So, unfortunately,
this is true.
We're going to be dealing with audio, but this is the reason why I wanted to have Ryan on the show. Ryan, I love talking to you. How you doing, man?
I'm doing really well, Matt. I'm doing really well. Thank you.
So Ryan and I had the pleasure of meeting here in Colorado. And, you know, I got to the end of that and thought people would have loved to just sit in on this. What I'd like to do is build on our... I guess I should get out of this game screen here. Let's first, before we talk about what we're going to do in the game, Ryan, why don't we tell people a little bit about you? Let's tell everyone what you do, where you live. Tell me about your family.
Okay. Well, I live on Vancouver Island, just off the west coast of the Pacific seaboard. Obviously, I'm not from around these parts originally. That was, I fell into a Canadian honey trap whilst I was on an archaeological dig in Jordan, which is kind of fun, a fun fact about my wife and I. And we kind of got together, stayed friends for a couple of years, got together back in England when she came over to study at university, and then when it came time to have children, kind of weighed up whether Canada or the UK was where we wanted to raise them. And the Comox Valley on Vancouver Island is ultimately where we decided to plonk ourselves down. So I've got a daughter and a son, Aurelia and Hector, both very monkey-like, very much like I was when I was their age, full of giggles, full of smiles, and full of trouble. Yeah, I work on a sprout farm, and my wife is a photographer. We live on about 0.6 of an acre in paradise. We have lots of fruit trees, a dog, 2 cats. And that's kind of a brief summary without going into too much depth of who I am and where I'm from.
No, that's great. That's great. Love hearing. Now, are your kids at the age yet where they're looking at star realms, or not quite yet?
Oh, very much so. Aurelia is 9 going on 15, and Hector is 7. They both enjoy a bit of Star Realms, a bit of Hero Realms, and plenty of other games in between. But it's they tend to gang up on Daddy quite a bit when they play, which is fine. It's important they enjoy the game, and you know, you can bring that must win, must crush my children and show them defeat so that they can earn the victory. But like, I'd rather they enjoy games. So that's kind of how we play. Frontiers is great for that because the cooperative play, but otherwise it tends to be 2 against 1, and I generally lose quite a bit in that scenario.
Sure. Yeah, one of the things I love about the game, so approachable. The fact is, they can be daddy. That is such a thing. That, a lot of games that we play, that's just probably not plausible. And here in Star Realms, that's one of the very
Not
nice
unless you're
features.
throwing it, like. Sorry, yeah. Is there a delay? Or am I just experiencing a delay?
Yeah, I think unfortunately the audio's not coming in as great as I was hoping here, but I think I want to keep going and just see how it goes. And I think to kind of get it going, Ryan, why don't we decide what we're going to do with the game? You and I have a nice history. We had a very nice best of 25. And you ended up taking that.
I did.
So I'd like to offer you tonight maybe a best of 9.
Okay, I'm down for that.
And what I figure what we'll do is we'll talk through some of our play, but then maybe through some of the games we'll talk about some other things. I'd like to offer you the format on the first 3 games. Would you like to send me a challenge?
Okay. I will send you a challenge, and you are going to get my signature format. And I think everyone at this stage knows what's coming. This for me, this started out when it was still achievable to knock out all the missing X packs on Pro Star Realms. All the missing game type where a combination of expansions hadn't ever been played. I kept picking random formats, and this one, which is WG1 EHC2U, I just had so much fun with it. And I've continued to have so much fun with it, and it's the format I have played the absolute most of. It is swingy nonsense.
So let's take a look. So I like what I see already. Looks like what we have is Colony Wars, both gambits, the original promos and year 2 promos, heroes and original events. So I like this. So we'll go ahead and accept. One of the other reasons I wanted to have Ryan on is he did recently contribute to the community with a couple of very nice articles, and I was looking back over those today, and I think I'd like to talk to you a little bit about our relationship with Star Realms.
Absolutely.
I think you did a really nice job. The theme that I was seeing there is just that. We have to sort of hone and figure out and develop and maintain our relationship with several aspects of this game. And I think you did a really nice job of pointing out some of those. Oh, well, really, I mean, yeah, most of them, all of them. So starting off, I do not have much going on here. I think we're going to set up our next hand.
Let me get back to the game screen. Let's see what's going on. Yeah, I think, when we met in Colorado, Matt, and before that as well, we both identified that, we'd been in our Magic the Gathering play, which is where a lot of my my thought process about games have been generated, because Magic's been a colossal part of my life. I started playing when I was quite young, and probably Ice Age was when I started playing that game. And a lot of the strategy involved in that game is very interesting and multifaceted, and just because Star Realms is a deck builder, any of those lessons don't apply. In fact, in some ways, some of them apply quite more keenly. And that Mark Rosewater, who's the lead designer of Magic the Gathering, has done some really great work on not just thoughts and themes that apply to his game, but threads that actually travel through all of our gaming experiences, because they're just such core fundamentals. And it does end up being that relationship with the game piece, because ultimately we play games to enjoy ourselves, and if we don't do that, like, why are we doing that? And the answer is, for some, because they want to succeed, they want to prove themselves to be the best at something, and that's fine, because they're getting enjoyment from that, they're getting something out of that experience. But not everyone wants to be the best Star Realms player in the world, and not everyone wants to achieve the same thing. So understanding how we get our enjoyment can allow us to then really key into that and interface with the game in order to allow us to have as much fun as we can. Because one of the biggest traps is kind of looking at other people and seeing what they're doing and beating yourself up because you're not doing as well as them or as much as them, or organizing things, and actually you're doing yourself that disservice where you're not looking at what's enriching your gameplay, looking at what other people are doing that you're not. They might not be things that ultimately interest you that much.
Yeah, I think that Magic is a really interesting way to start looking at relationship forming. I mean, I remember that somewhat distinctly. I mean, you learn Magic, and it starts off as something that's kind of fun. Your friends are doing it. You can build, decks around themes. And then one of your friends or more introduce you to the competitive form of Magic, and suddenly it does change. It does, and kind of the innocence and the joy you initially find in your first impression sometimes can be a little tainted. And that's where, again, you have to sort of decide at that point which way you're going to go. And bringing it kind of back to Star Realms, yeah, I think, when I first got this game and realized that I could have as many games as I want going. And I did. I mean, hey, let's play 20 games a day. That is something each person has to figure out and form a relationship with. It's the first game addiction that I ever came across that really was sort of unchecked. I mean, I can't play Call of Duty when I'm at work, and I can't play Magic the Gathering if I didn't have an opponent. Star Realms, you never really have to turn off.
No, that's right. And I'm just going to jump in and actually take your turn so that this gets
Yeah.
Now I see.
No, here's the thing. Again, we don't need to talk over all the turns. Again.
I see that my favorite card.
With this show,
I see that my favorite card in the world is on the row, and if I remember rightly, it was this format that I first played you in when you were kind enough to appear as the swarmee for the Rogue Swarm.
I did enjoy a Rogue
Swarm. One of the
Swarm.
top 100 players, and it was 2 games each. And Matt was one of the most accepting people in terms of the top 100 players, and just said, you know what, throw any format. I don't care. Bring it on. So you got my particular brand of nonsense in 2 games. And as much as I would like to sit here and say, I was not that experienced a player, and I thrashed the cutter 2-0 with skill and verve and panache, I got 2 of the most stacked, event-filled nonsense games you could ever achieve. And in one, I think I got Peacekeeper first turn, and in the other, I think I got Arc first turn. Or if it wasn't first, it was third. I felt bad. But that's not going to stop me from spinning the dice and trying to get a first turn Peacekeeper again. And as we can see, much to the crowd's glee, that is going to happen.
Very nice.
And I'm going to burn my Gambit to take Convoy Bot, because that's probably one of the other great Colony War cards.
Hot.
And we're off to the races.
If there was ever a time, Ryan, where it felt like you were less experienced and I had some advantage, I've never felt that. I feel like since you came on, our games have always been tight and interesting. It's one of the things that I really enjoy. Now, just to clarify again, with this particular stream, Ryan, I don't expect you to call your plays. You know, we can certainly do that, but I'm fine just rolling through them as we talk. The reason I wanted to have you on is so that people can kind of get to know you, and that's what's going to take precedent here on this particular stream. So yeah, I'm just going to kind of keep talking. I'll take my turns. But yeah, I really want to get back to, again, to kind of your insight here with something I think you have a good grasp on, and that, again, is just the relationships that we form. In addition to the volume, we have to figure out our relationship with leveling. We have to figure out our relationship with chaos. All of these things, you know, Star Realms is such an interesting game.
It really is. And, you know, there's the chaos element, I think, is oft not necessarily overplayed to specific expansion packs, but, you know, in any game, you know, whether it's Magic, where the top of your deck is a mystery, and it could be any card, it could even be a boat, you know, there's that variance in Star Realms as well. You know, you're playing off a trade row of 5 cards out of the entire deck. The next card is random. It always is. Whether events are in play or not, it's still random what comes off the top. You know, so there's always that element of variance, and you know, events do throw a little bit of a multiplier in there. They do add just a little bit extra. But if you know what's in there and you know what you're playing with, you obviously cannot control them, but you can play in such a way that minimizes your risk to them. So where the chaos comes in, I don't always accept point of view, and you know, opinions, we've all got them, and mine might not be as pretty as anyone else's, and it could even be wrong. But when people say, you know, events are so random, I don't think they're so very much more random than the game is normally. They just tweak it a little bit, and it's that other side of the game as well, where, you know, we talk quite often about, oh, I bottom decked this card on the last deck, and this would have changed everything. Well, you know, to a certain degree, the choices we make at the start of the game have a much bigger impact, and because they're so much further removed from the end of the game, we don't cognitively think of them as having as much of an effect. But whether you buy that Explorer or you try to take that one cost off the road, begin with, and end up flipping something outrageously good for your opponent, those decisions are just as important and have almost a larger impact on the game. And you know, I'm not the best player of Star Realms. I fully admit that. I tend to be quite swingy. You know, sometimes I'm hot and sometimes I'm merely average. But there's definitely a lot of autopilot I do, and I think everyone's autopilot is very different. And I play a series of games with Clever Missy, and we haven't played one in quite some time because we're both quite busy. It's along the same lines as the 25 challenge, but it's a 40 challenge, and we play them all at once.
Wow.
So we will queue 40 games, and because of the mechanics of challenging someone, you have to do them 5 at a time. So you'll queue up 5 games, and then they have to accept them, and then you'll queue up 5 more, and then they accept them. And so you do that in packs of 5, 8 times, and then you've got 40 games on the go. And then you'll set aside some time, and you'll both sit down and you will just hammer them out. And the way Jen and I play those is it's kind of the goal is not to win per se, even though that's definitely on the cards. The goal is to get through them as fast as possible whilst trying to make good decisions without really thinking too much about it. And so when I talk about the autopilot, I sometimes think that, through our accumulated experience and maybe default thought patterns, we have a base level of competence in a game. If you're playing distracted, if you're not thinking through your turns properly, you will still subconsciously make all these decisions about why you buy a card, why you don't buy a card, why you choose to flip through to the next deck. And if you're not thinking about those are very automatic actions. And so what I found with Jen is that I don't necessarily play that much better or worse in our 40 challenges than I do just normally, which tells me that a lot of the time when I'm playing Star Realms, I'm just floating through the games, enjoying myself, and not a wrecker. That's outrageous. There'll be a reckoning. I'm not actually thinking through my plays as articulately as I should do. And a good example of that is Son of Thoth 94, a player who regularly absolutely spanks me whenever we play a game. But in the last couple of endurances I've come up against him, I've really sat down and thought, all right, John, you're not going to beat me today. We're going to have a really good go at it, and I'm going to do my absolute best to make sure I stick you one. And in the last 2 games we've had, I feel like I've played some of my best Star Realms. And I have made different decisions and played maybe more aggressively than I normally do, because I'm very greedy. I'm a very greedy player. And that's why I love W. W has lots of economy, lots of big swingy cards. You can buy things to hand. It's a paradise of nonsense. And that's why I don't do quite as well, say, with Frontiers, which is a more aggressive game. My default in gaming in general is to be more of a counter-attacking defensive player. In many games that I've played, that's quite often the role I take in a single or a multiplayer game. And I used to play quite a lot of StarCraft when I was younger, perhaps an unhealthy amount, some would say.
Hey, look who you're talking to, man. There's no unhealthy amount.
There's no unhealthy amount. Very true. I used to play, for anyone who doesn't know, StarCraft, there's 3 races. You've got the Terrans, the Protoss, and the Zergs. And the Zergs are kind of an alien, aggressive race who generally have the rush tactics down and are all about drowning your opponents and enemies. The Protoss tend to deal with less units, less numbers in their units, but have a higher ceiling on skill. And the Terrans are kind of the middle ground, where if you're very skilled with the Terrans, you can defeat anyone, because they have, again, this is just opinion, but they have the flexibility to fulfill any role very well. And my favorite was always the Protoss, because if your micro was good, if you could move your units in such a way as to minimize the amount of time they spent on the damage front, you could then wear your opponent down, and then you could go after them with your defensive units. And that's kind of often how I like to play. And default styles also play into an interesting element of Star Realms as well, because we all have our defaults, our favorites, and you'll often play someone and you'll be like, I know they're going to try and buy all the yellow in this game, and I'm never going to see any. I do try to play the row. Not always play the expansion packs, actually. that's something that I have a very bad habit about doing. Is that I would say in about 75% of games, I have no idea what we're playing because I haven't clicked menu. If I'm just queuing, if I'm just rolling through ranked games,
Sure.
I will rarely see what expansion packs have been playing.
I'm at 20,
And
huh?
I'll just respond.
Sorry? I just realized I'm at 20 life.
Yeah, that's a thing that's happening. That's why Peacekeeper is such a fantastic card, because it's a 12-point swing. And someone, I think it might have been Brian or Adam, I can't remember, but they said, either you rate it too highly or you overrate it. And I was like, no, I rate that card exactly where it should be because it is fantastic.
Now, let me ask you, Ryan. I love that you're thinking about conscious versus unconscious play, autopilot. It's one of these things that I have thought so much about. And I don't know if you've ever seen the Brain documentary on PBS. Dr. David Eagleman is a neuroscientist, I believe. And he goes in one of those episodes about how our brain is constantly trying to take over the things that we do a lot. And I have never quite been able to put into an article anything that I want to say about it, but I've thought a ton about it. I think that our brain is trying to do that with Star Realms, and it's the reason we want to hit play all. And yeah, our brain is constantly trying to take over on autopilot. Let me ask you this. Since you said you play a ton of StarCraft, do you feel a similar pull in that type of game?
Yeah, so my StarCraft days are long gone in a sense. It was original StarCraft and Brood Wars, not StarCraft 2. That was kind of an era that was signed, sealed, delivered, and over. But nevertheless, the question still stands. I was a very different player when it came to StarCraft. I did not play for the giggles. I played to, and I was a much younger man actually, and this also speaks to the kind of the eras of gameplay that we might go through. I was not necessarily a win at all costs player, but I was out to crush you, and any way I could manage that, I would do it. And if that meant pulling dirty tricks that were legal but not particularly pleasant, that was happening. If you'd left a particular chink in your armor, maybe you'd gone for that greedy second base early and I could rush you, the Zergling rush was on and it was going to happen. And so there I was very much concentrate on the micro, concentrate on getting everything perfect. The first 7 harvesters out as fast as you could. And in some ways, StarCraft was kind of like chess, because, in chess you have that, this is this particular opening, and this is how you respond to that opening. And StarCraft as a game very much had that. You scout them, they're doing this. Okay, this is my response. And once you get through those first kind of 10 to 20 moves, then you're into the, okay, now what are we doing to win the game from here, because this element of the game isn't mapped out. So now I've gone from my set piece into my kind of mid to late game where I actually need to work hard about thinking about what's going on. And that plays into the why we play the game, and it plays into the psychographics of the game that I've put in the articles from Magic from Mark Rosewater about the kind of the Timmy, Tammy, Johnny, Jenny spike, which if anyone's not familiar with, it goes into more depth later on, but the crux of it is that Mark says that there are kind of 3 broad swathes of players. There are the players who don't want a Timmy or Tammy, they want to feel something. They play a game to have fun and have a rush and that big card that makes them excited. Spike wants to prove something. he wants to prove that they are the best player. She wants to prove that they have the best collection. And then Bonnie Jenny is more about playing their own way, doing something clever, doing something offbeat, being noticed for having something unexpected happen that maybe they thought out of the box on and no one else ever did. And I definitely, to kind of come back to that question about did you play StarCraft that way, I have very much transitioned in my young days from hard spike, like I'm not going to enjoy it unless I'm winning. And as I've gotten older and played more games, and kind of you have more pulls on your time as you get older, naturally, you know, you've got work and friend groups and maybe family and children and other things. It becomes less about hard winning and more about how I interface with the game to enjoy it. Because the thing is, even if you're a fantastic player, still probably going to lose 3 out of every 10 games. So you're kind of going to have to get used to losing. And in that regard, if you're going to lose at best 3 out of 10 games, how do you make sure that you don't absolutely detest those? How do you enjoy them? And that for me is as much an ongoing challenge as a player. Sorry, I'm laughing because my daughter has brought me some water and she's bowing and flicking her hand like a butler. Thank you, Aurelia. I do want to enjoy a game whether I'm winning or losing. I don't want to lose all my games, obviously, but you know, finding that enjoyment even when the game hasn't ended favorably is I think really, really important, and it helps you keep up that social contract. A game is a social contract between 2 or more players. They are all there to try and have a good time. And if you're not having a good time, and you make that very obvious, you're going to spoil the experience for not just yourself, but for others as well.
I'm going to ask you to resend that challenge, Ryan, to get the format correct, if you don't mind. And you are
Absolutely.
up 1-0. Good game. Yeah, I think, again, you just bring up a really good point. Someone recently asked me, and that someone was Tatiana. We're going to talk about Tatiana in a little bit.
Tatiana's cracking.
If I'm competitive, and you know, it was an interesting for someone just to outright ask, I'm the most competitive person I know, but I think what you're pointing at is wanting to beat your friends or your spouse is a lot different than wanting to destroy everybody.
Yeah.
And again, it's something that I think we form a relationship with, and I'm with you. I'm a person that probably some of my friends grew to not necessarily want to game with if I was, you know, wanting to play a game that I've played a bunch. And I'm the person too that like you said, they gang up on daddy. They, you know, your friends kind of gang up on the person that tends to win. And over time, yeah, I very much have learned that sometimes the win-win is really helping those figure out how to go about winning. And by no means am I saying let anyone win, but maybe during some of those games you help explore the boundaries. I mean, and you know, I really found this recently. I don't know if you're a Stigmeyer fan of Scythe and Charterstone fame, but you know, we recently did a campaign, and there's so much to take in that really I just enjoyed exploring the boundaries and learning the game, and winning was not as big of a factor, and it feels kind of good.
Yeah, I've played Scythe exactly once, and I really enjoyed the experience.
So good.
But there was I used to play a lot of Warhammer 40,000. That's a tabletop miniature game. There's a very rich literal kind of history of the game. The Black Library books, they're really good. And for me, storyline it is a big part of my enjoyment in a game, which is why if they ever release the command decks into the digital app, that for me is going to be a real paradigm shift in my enjoyment of the game, because then we're going to be able to do so many story-based tournaments, campaigns. Like literally, my heart is aflutter with the possibilities of what the tournament scene and the kind of the storyline campaign scene could look like there. But anyway, I digress. So 40,000, Warhammer 40,000, tabletop miniature game, toy soldiers, whatever you want to call it. And that for me was, there were two instances where that was a really pivotal moment in my gaming experience. And for me, miniature wargaming was something I kind of came to around 20 or so. A lot of my friends had kind of been involved with it when they were much younger. And I came to it in my 20s, so, you know, young man, feeling good about himself and his place in the world and wanting to prove that he's really good at everything. And I was not always the most fun person. The one thing I really remember, and it was so clear. We had a 750 point tournament amongst ourselves, which is a very small army. You know, maybe 14 figures in a game where you might play with 50 or 100 or 200. And I constructed my army in such a way that absolutely min-maxed everything. And the army was very good, and I played it very well, and everyone had a miserable time. Like, absolutely miserable. I didn't enjoy the game because they hated the game. They didn't enjoy the game because I had cheesed it really hard. And it reminded me of an article that Jervis Johnson, who's one of the creators of the game, made, and it was about, he calls it the face. And we've all been there. We're all super guilty of it. And it's when, you know, that moment in a game when it becomes very clear that you now have little to no chance of winning. You know, when the odds are so low that you may as well throw in the towel. And physically, you know, if you're playing in person anyway, you know, your shoulders slump, you kind of, you lose the eye contact, you kind of, your communication skills kind of can drop to the shrugs and the, yeah, okay, fine, whatever.
You're on tilt.
And yeah, absolutely. You are on tilt, 100%. And you cease to be an enjoyable opponent. And the thing that article came to mind when I was playing at the Ravenway 750 point list, because I was effectively forcing people into that position with my army choices and my playstyle choices. And that was actually the pivotal moment where I kind of went, hang on a minute, I'm being a real ass here. My friends and I are playing games, and we're here to enjoy it, and I'm here to crush them, and no one's having a good time. And what happens if you're not having a good time with people? Like, you end up just not playing with them. So I kind of made a conscious choice after that to change how I played games with my friends in those scenarios. And that, for me anyway, really helped my understanding of how to have fun and how to be a good opponent, because that's important too. You know, you have the, you know, don't be a sore loser, but don't be a sore winner either. Don't be a bad opponent. And that is just as important in any game really, because no one likes losing and having their face rubbed in it. And it's not a pleasant way to approach a game at all. And so, you know, that how you comport yourself when you're playing games against people, especially friends, is to me super important. And that was a real kind of, I mean, I was in my mid-20s, but that was a real growing up experience in terms of how I played and enjoyed games with people whose time are meant to be enriching and not making worse.
Yeah, that's one aspect I didn't necessarily love about myself during my competitive Magic days, and we're talking a long time ago.
Yeah.
But I mean, yeah, it was, at the time we were dealing with the DCI, and I had a fair rating. We're talking vintage and legacy, and it was
What
tough
was your rating,
because
man? Just I mean,
if I lost
you can
even
remember.
a match, it was going to affect me negatively, and that kind of got in my head. And yeah, if I took a hard stumble, some kid basically playing, a standard deck that I just wasn't sideboarded for, because that could happen. I mean, you can always lose to Burn or Goblin, even in Type 1.
Absolutely.
I would kind of turn into a jerk for the rest of the day. Like, it was just like, okay, chip on my shoulder, and I don't really miss that.
No, it's definitely a phase that I'm happy to be over with. Because there's the whole, I deserve to win that game. I should never have been beaten. Like, that should not have happened. There's that kind of mindset at times. And okay, dial it back. You were favored probably to win that game. But you're not going to win them all. You're just not. And that kind of the salt is real and very dangerous, because too much salt in your diet is really bad for you, both for your enjoyment and the enjoyment of everyone else playing with you as well. But that was something I think I covered as well, because I mean, again, I think everyone who's played games, unless you're an angel, has been salty at some point. We've all been really annoyed with a particular situation, or like you said, that kind of, and you don't get it as much in Star Realms, for which I'm very grateful, but that matchup in Magic where you sit down against someone and they whip out their deck, they play their first card, and your eyes just roll into the back of your head because you're like, oh God, no, not this deck. Like, I have about a 10% chance of winning any of these games, and it's probably only going to be 2 because it's going to be 2-0. You don't get that as much in Star Arms. But that's 5 minutes less into a game, and we're already not enjoying it, because the way the meta had structured, it's kind of a coin toss. I don't know if you were playing in Combo Winter at all, but that was that was quite fun. Where the pre-game was deck building, the mid-game was the shuffle, and then the end game was who got to play first, essentially. So that can happen.
I think what's interesting is people coming out of the world of say draft and constructed type strategy card games get to Star Realms, and they really are expecting to carry over that win percentage that they experience either with their friends or in tournament. And they get here and find out that if you're a proficient player, not the best, but proficient, you're still probably sitting in the low 50s. And I think some people have a really hard time with the idea that they're going to lose on a coin toss basis sometimes.
Yeah. Because again, okay, sorry, yeah. My wife was just was beckoning, and I tend to do as I'm told because she's a black belt. In fact, she carries 2 black belts, so it's good to listen to one's wife, and they carry 2 black belts.
Mm-hmm.
But no, it's a valid point. And here's the thing: randomization in a game is very, 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 very good for its longevity. Not too much randomization, but to have some. And that's because let's dial it back to chess. The only randomization in chess is who is white. It's the only random element. Who goes first? That's it.
Mm-hmm.
After that, everything is skill, thought, experience, intelligence, and the ability to react to a situation you're not commonly come across. So if two people are playing chess, probably 95 times out of 100, the person who's better, if not more, is going to win.
Mm-hmm.
And sorry, let me just let the dog in. Oh no, the dog's fine.
Please.
In that situation, even the most resilient persona is still going to struggle winning that few games because, it's fun to win. And even if winning is not the thing that you crave and need most in your life, winning like 5% of your games, that's hard. That's a really hard wake-up call on you as a player versus the person or people you're playing. And it takes a really robust ego to deal with that as well. So it's actually really good for games like Star Realms to have enough of a random element that, any bad player like Brian can beat the best players, if they play well and have a little bit of luck. And I love Brian to bits, so I don't really mean that. He's probably harder on himself than anyone else.
Talking Mr. Machin, are you referring to?
Yes, Brian Machin, the number one ranked player in the world in Star Realms, who plays a prodigiously ridiculous amount of games. Like I don't even know how, but nevertheless, he is the mantle. But no, it's being able to win against anyone is actually a thing to celebrate in a game because it gives you that catch-up mechanic and it gives you that win because when you beat a player who's much better than you, it doesn't matter how it happened, it feels amazing. And they could beat you for the next 9 games and you've still got that kind of like that memory of, do you know what? I smashed them and it felt good.
So Mr. Machin, I'm positive is listening to us. He has been very supportive here of me and my streams. The other thing
he's a fantastic.
You mentioned Brian, and he has me. He's been telling everyone, screaming for a long time about how good missions are. Have you delved truly into mission play? Say to the degree that he has. That have you explored them thoroughly?
I don't think anyone who is not called Adam and Brian have explored missions as deeply as those two. I very much enjoy missions. But missions are one of those packs where if I'm queuing, if I'm playing ranked, 9 times out of 10, I will hit, or I used to hit quick play. In fact, probably 99 times out of 100, I would hit quick play. And then when missions came along, I noticed that I was losing significantly more games than I was before. And this comes back to that kind of that autopilot, that residual kind of set piece you have in your head, where I think my win percentage is around 58%, something like that, and it doesn't really move, the dial doesn't really move a lot, whether I'm thinking about my games really hard or whether I'm just kind of, that's a good decision next, that's a good decision next, that's a good decision next. They're not all good decisions. But when I'm playing 40 games with missions, the thread of the game is so much more difficult to keep a hold of. And by that, what I mean is when I first started playing Star Realms, I couldn't really play more than about 4 games at the same time without my ability to win any of those games tanking heavily. Because at that stage in my Star Realms experience, I couldn't handle what was going on. I couldn't keep in mind all these games and what my deck was doing every single one, until I just got used to it a bit more, and I played a couple, and then I played a couple more, and then the 40 challenge with Jen, and then all of a sudden, like, I'm playing 80 to 90 games at a time at one stage, not always. Still keeping a pretty healthy win percentage, and being able to identify a game by, okay, this is my double convoy bot game, or, oh, this is the pure Star Empire plan, or this is the game where I'm trying to beat them before they kill me with bases. When missions encroaches upon that, I find it a lot more difficult, because missions have an asynchronous relationship with the game in such that you can't roll an advantage without bearing in mind that they can just come from anywhere and absolutely annihilate you in 3 turns. Because they've been doing nothing for the game. Like, they've done nothing because you haven't been paying attention properly, because you've got like 50 games on the go, and you've been like, that's a good decision. That's a good decision. And then all of a sudden, they complete 3 missions in a row and you're dead.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, trying to keep hold of 40 games with missions in is something that I've not yet got to the level of achieving. And I know you don't have to play it like that. I'm sure, I think Adam plays maybe 10 at a time. And he'll silo them like that, which is an interesting way of controlling the amount of information he's trying to pass at once. So I very much enjoy playing with missions. I like them. I like the fact that there are different win conditions. I like that you can be like down to 1 or 2 authority and still pull off the win, despite being like heavily unfavored in any normal game. But I can't play them in bulk, because that's one of my limits. I can't achieve the level of playing 50 or 60 of them and still win enough games to keep myself happy.
No, I think you pinpointed it. In separating conscious versus unconscious play, one of the things I'm enjoying as I am right now, I'm inhaling missions. I mean, I consider Brian's taken on a Padawan here. He's kind of opened my eyes to it, and what it's done is it's thrust me back into every decision being conscious. There is no autopilot if you are devoting to missions to the extent that Brian has demonstrated success can be had. And it is interesting. I mean, it really does take me out of just sort of pounding through turns to suddenly, wow, I got to stop and I got to catch every single possible exploit. And that isn't easy, when you're coming out of an autopilot mindset.
Definitely. And one of the other things that's really nice about missions is that, as you get familiar with sets, and, talking about Tatiana earlier, I remember talking to her as she was branching out from vanilla and going into other base sets, and kind of talking about, well, here's my take on what are good cards and good decisions to make in Colony Wars, and why that would be different from vanilla. But with missions, there are generally accepted within any base set, these are, generally speaking, a bad card. This is a bad card. You generally don't want this card. But with missions, sometimes, actually, it's exactly the card you need. And understanding when you're quote-unquote buying a bad card can be really powerful. But also, understanding when your opponent's buying a bad card and trying to kind of wrinkle out the mission that they're aiming for doing that, because that's another sub game in missions, is not only you trying to complete your missions, and not only you trying to not necessarily let on what those missions are, you're also trying to work out what's your opponent trying to achieve. How can I stop them? How can I throw a spanner in their works? What card can I destroy or buy off the row? It doesn't hurt my plan too much, but tanks theirs. And that's a really interesting subgame that I'm really bad at.
Things okay over there?
But yeah. Yes, something just got dropped and then the dog jumped up, but it's all good.
So I'll tell you what, I am inspired by Tatiana. I want to thank you. Ryan was very nice. During this time where Tatiana was kind of learning these new sets, and to reiterate what Ryan just said, Tatiana Johnson played vanilla for essentially 4 years. And did so in a fashion where Star Realms was kind of a thing to pass time. Something that you enjoy, something that helps you get through the day. It's kind of a fidget spinner. And then what happened one day is she decided, hey, I like this game enough. I want to get better. I mean, after a significant amount of games, something kind of clicked and she went, hey, I'm putting this much time in. Let's explore this. Ryan was nice enough, kind of helped usher her my way a little bit. And what started off as a little bit of a mentorship has become a great friendship. And now what I realize, holy crap, you can suddenly decide from that casual perspective, I want to get good at this. And in 6 months, she just recently posted, she went from level 17 to 40. She's dominating her place in Board Game Geek. And just doing very well in general. And that is inspiring. That is the kind of thing that makes me want to write content, because there's a lot of I don't want to say a lot, but there's enough content out there for new players, and I'm not going to write content for people, for the people that are better than me now. But to know that you can decide after a period of time, you have we talk about relationships. You've got one relationship with this game to go, I want to get better. You totally can.
You really can. And just to pick up on a couple of points there, Matt, and the last one I'll address first is Tatiana actually was super guilty of kind of pushing me to write some content. It was like, you should write some content. I'm like, should I though? Like, there's a lot of players who are much better. And it was that thing. It was like, there's a lot of players who I consider are much better than me. What content could I write that would work? And actually in the end, and the reason why I ended up, and I actually ran it past a couple of people, Stephanie, Jen, Tatiana, Sandra, and a couple of other rogues, before sending it to Al, and then the wider world, was actually just finding something that I felt that I knew a decent enough about. It wasn't actually strategy, but could be related to Star Realms in a transferable way, and because there are a lot of players out there who are very good, and some of them are quite quiet in the group, some of them are quite vocal in the group, some of them are on Board Game Geek and not on the Facebook group at all.
Mm-hmm.
And so in terms of strategy, I don't feel that I had the solid confidence to be like, you know what, I'm going to write about this topic and I am going to be right like most of the time, and people are going to be able to listen to that and go, yeah, he knows what he's talking about. Whereas on the piece I actually ended up writing, it's not necessarily that it was about being right, but more that it was interesting. It interested me, and I felt kind of strongly enough about it to write that. And certainly Tatiana was responsible for like prodding me gently in a friendly way to be like, do it, just do it, I'll do it. And so I definitely thank her for that. But yeah, I think she played about 25,000 games.
She just posted a screenshot, dude. She's at 40.
Oh, 40. No, I know, right? I know she's at 40. But she played about 25,000 games before even thinking about
yes,
like the community or like winning games and thinking about like focusing on strategy. Like 25,000 games is a lot of games.
Mm-hmm.
40,000 games. Like, there's only, I believe, it's only Tatiana and Darklighter who are in the 40K club.
I think people kind of assume that I am in the 40,000. I'm not. I'm around 32. So to find out Tatiana had more than me was eye-opening. But yeah, just what you said. I mean, to go to transition from this game having one relationship to suddenly I want to focus. I want to get better. It is inspiring, and yeah, I'm telling you, man, you wrote content, and this is she's part of the reason we're talking today. So, I think that's where we'll leave it. But thank you for kind of sending her my way. We're good friends now. It's fun. She's a great person.
Excellent, and that's. I mean, as well, I really want to kind of put a shout out to the wider Star Realms community. I've through my 42 years of life and games and communities that I've played, there are lots of different types of communities. Some of them are good communities, and some of them are toxic hells from which everyone wants to escape, but somehow cannot because they love the game itself so much. And the Star Realms community, I don't think I've found another community that is so generally well behaved. There's the odd occasion, but generally speaking, they're well behaved, they're mature, very accepting. It's probably one of the highest level mixes between men and women that I've seen in many gaming communities. There's a lot of women that play Star Realms. There's a lot of older people that play Star Realms. There's a lot of breadth in the languages and nationalities of players that play Star Realms. And it's really nice to see that diversity and equality in any gaming community. And it's a joy every time you go into that Facebook group and see people just interacting pleasantly. And there's a bit of fun smack talk every now and then, and that's healthy between friends. But the community as a whole is just really great. I can't say enough good about it. And it's whenever I'm talking about healthy gaming practices, the Star Realms community is definitely high on that list of communities that really support each other and are just very accepting. Because that's not always the case, and it's something that when you're in that community you can take for granted. If you've never experienced the other side of the coin, which can be awful. So everyone should actually be quite proud of that, because it's a really nice place to play games, and I think why it's sticking around for as long as it has.
We have been so fortunate. I mean, we absolutely had been part of negative gaming communities. And I think, in the beginning, maybe that's why we were a tiny bit overvigilant with, I don't think anymore, but with admitting, it turns out, we discovered fairly quickly that, this group is adult, this group is respectful, this group generally, there's been a few incidences, but for the most part, you hit it on the head. It just turns out that it's a great group of people, and I think it's become a forever community for a lot of people, whether or not they're even still playing Star Realms. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, for sure. It's it's excellent, and kind of I think one of the reasons for that, and dialing back to what you were talking about earlier about you can't play Call of Duty at work, you can't play lots of things wherever you are. The asynchronous nature of the game is one of its core strengths, and the games that the community create for itself, the content that the community creates for itself, is a really strong factor in retaining players and retaining the interest of people in the game, because then it's not just a game that you play on your phone. It's those those like annual or bi-monthly or cyclical tournaments. You have favorites. You have ones that you have a special attachment to because maybe that was the first one you did well in. You have the one that you are still playing because you can never do very well in it, and it's now being on it. And there's lots of reasons to come back and play, not just the game, but the game in certain ways. We've got Olympiad tournaments, we had a World Cup tournament, we've got Board Game Geek, you've got the dodgeball stuff, which is really taken off. And there's so many ways to play the game, which is surprising for what ostensibly is a very straightforward deck building game.
Yeah. It's so funny that now beyond formats, we've sort of got genres. Differential Star Realms is very different than race-based Star Realms, and mission-based Star Realms is very different than differential-based Star Realms. I mean, all of these require complete new sets of valuation and an understanding of the context. And I don't know that we could have seen that coming, but how fun.
Yeah, and the very fact that we have a dodgeball tournament that apes quite well, actually, the mechanics of a game of dodgeball that involves a deck building game that can be played with reasonable rapidity, even though the turns are 48 hours, that has a draft system that people engage in, that is live and people watch. It's mind-boggling how much development there is there and continues to be, and why, if Rob or Darwin is listening ever, please break your backs to implement the command decks in this game, because it will be amazing.
All right, so I don't know that you were able to catch some of the recent White Wizard, weekly Tuesdays, but, well, actually this wasn't even on a weekly Tuesday. On the AMA, on the Ask Me Anything, I feel like White Wizard's being a little more transparent than they have over the course of time. And Rob, maybe who's sick of just getting the question, finally did sort of say, okay, guys, think December. And that's when we're going to get some commander decks.
And for anyone who can't see me, I'm making the face that you can see on the screen.
I can't lie.
It's actually very close.
I am a little, I'm a little interested to get commander decks as well. Can't lie.
I can't think why that might be, Matt. Is it because you could dominate people with your own deck? Very much like you did to me in Colorado.
So looking forward to it. All right, on that, let me ask you, tell me about your trip to Cheyenne Mountain Zoo.
Oh, that was excellent. To start with, it's one of my favorite Facebook profile pictures ever, where I've got a giraffe licking my bald head. But I did tempt it with lettuce, so it wasn't completely opportune. We'd gone to, actually dial back a little bit. When my wife and I and Aurelia emigrated to Canada, at the time we had 2 Burmese cats, and we were very concerned about flying them because animals and flights can not go well. So we're like, maybe we don't want to fly them out to North America. Lots of bad things can happen to animals in planes. They can dehydrate, they can cook, they can, get too cold, etc., etc. How would we get them there if we did not fly? Well, there is this boat that goes from the UK to America, and that would be kind of cool to do. So we took the boat across, and they had like a section for a set amount of animals that you could put them in for the week, and you could visit them every day, and that was kind of cool.
I was going to ask, how long did that take? You're saying about a week?
It was 7 days. If you'd taken it to Halifax, it would have been the full 10. But yeah, it set out from Southampton, and then a week later we landed in New York. One thing we hadn't factored in, actually, was that we would land in New York. at about 1 p.m. on a Friday, and we'd kind of mapped out, because then, right, you're taking a cruise ship, so your cats don't have an accident in a plane. You can't then take a plane from New York State to Canada. You may as well have taken the plane from England. So then we're like, okay, we'll drive across North America.
Now, real quick, I want to clarify. You specifically took a boat for the cat's benefit.
That is accurate.
Okay. Just making sure.
Hey, they were the best ever cats.
You were the best cat owner ever.
Best cats ever. But yeah, anyway, so our original plan was to hire an RV and drive into Canada, and then drive across Canada from east to west, because that way you see the Rockies majestically rising out of the soil, and you come to kind of the wild west of BC. But we were stymied because, as a non-North American, or certainly as a non-American, you can't hire a recreational vehicle and take it outside of America, which is not unreasonable. So then we were forced to drive across America. Now, I will at this point state that the English are somewhat guilty of poking fun at Americans.
No.
And the stereotypical Americans, when you get the kind of the quote of, "My country's so beautiful, why would I go anywhere else?" And the English are kind of like, "Ho ho ho, silly Americans! Like, why would you not go anywhere else? There are lots of wonderful countries." And then you drive across America, and you're kind of forced to eat some of that tasty humble pie, because it really is a gorgeous country. I mean, my wife and I fell in love with the Corner States. Although we didn't get to Colorado on that journey, we did New Mexico, Arizona, and Utah. But we went kind of in a smiley face from New York State down to Georgia, where my cousin was living at the time, with his now wife, and then up into Kentucky. We had friends in Kentucky, and then down across Mississippi and Arkansas, which is no offense to Arkansas, but was not my favorite state. Into the Corner States, and we went down to Roswell because that sounded funny. And Roswell's advertising was that it's 3 hours from anywhere. And let me tell you, it really is 3 hours from anywhere, like in any direction that you choose. But there was some fun stuff we did on that trip, like I used to work in third-party supply chain logistics, and our customer was Network Rail. I was an inventory manager. And he used to work in the motor industry, and he told me about this place he'd been to in America called Paris, Tennessee. And he'd been to Paris, Tennessee.
Home of the Eiffel Tower. No.
Yes. Yes, Matt. It has a mini Eiffel Tower.
Oh, it does.
No, it really does. It's like probably 20 foot tall. In true classic like chintzy fashion, it is there in all its regalia. But that wasn't the landmark that my colleague Stephen Livington had been directed to go to when he was there. He was there and he was chatting to his kind of American counterpart, and they were like, "Oh, have you seen the fish?" And
fish.
Stephen was like, "The fish?" He was like, "Oh, you should see the fish. It's really great." So anyway, he took him out of his hotel. He drove him to a crossroads and was like, "There's the fish." It was a sign. It was the most exciting thing in Paris, Tennessee, according to this car manufacturing guy, was this colossal carp sign. It was about like 20 by 30 foot or whatever. And so I said to Stephen, like, "Oh, well, we're driving through like Kentucky, Hopkinsville. It's, we'll be going through Tennessee." We're like, oh, you've got to go to Paris.
You've got
to see the fish.
You gotta see the fish.
So I made sure I see the fish. So I made sure I sent him a picture of me in front of the fish, like doing the thumbs up and stuff like that. That was really, really funny. But yeah, so we drove across America, and it was 3 weeks, 5,353 miles.
Wow.
A couple of near misses. being English, we don't really have big roads. We don't really have colossally large vehicles. And so I'd never driven anything that was that big before in my life. And there was a couple of times that were quite dicey, especially when we first got in it. In fact, my wife and I had planned to share the driving across America. And going back to a previous point that we didn't realize, somehow blanked that we were getting into New York State at 1 p.m. on a Friday, picking up an RV, and then driving south. And we were like, oh, we'll get to DC in 4 hours because that's what Google Maps says. Mais non. That is what Google Maps says. But when you're trying to do the New Jersey Turnpike in rush hour, you're in a 31-foot RV that you've never driven anything nearly half as big. And everyone is leaving New York State to go home for the weekend, and they are ruthless in their commandeering of the road. And it didn't really work out so well for us. So after that particular drive, my wife just looked at me. She was like, "You're driving this for the whole 3 weeks. That is not something I'm getting involved in." But after that, actually, it was fine. It was really quite pleasant because nothing was that crazy after that. Colorado was one of the places that we missed out on. And so we've got friends there. My wife grew up with one of them, and we went to see them. So that's I originally was gonna try and hook up with another Ryan Powell.
There is another Ryan Powell here in Denver, and we have talked about maybe getting together to play Epic face to face, but have not been able to yet. And it was so confusing when you came in and were suddenly so active because the other Ryan Powell used to post occasionally too.
Yeah, that was, I think, I can't remember who it was. It might have been Adam. But I kept getting tagged or Ryan kept getting tagged wrongly, and for the life of them, people couldn't work out which Ryan Powell they were meant to be playing at any one point in time. But yeah, Ryan and I tried to get a game together, and our schedules just couldn't line up. So that's why you kind of clued into that, and we hooked up a game. But yeah, Shiny Mountain Zoo was great. It's a zoo basically on the side of a mountain, which is bonkers. And it has a really great breadth of animals. They're all pretty happy as well, pretty chilled out. And the kids just loved it. It was great. But yeah, a zoo tacked onto the side of a mountain where there's also a military depot somewhere inside it. It was pretty cool.
Now, I think when people hear zoo on the side of a mountain, what they envision is a zoo at the base of a mountain. But Cheyenne Mountain Zoo is on
the side.
Yes. And it is usually the thing that I will try to take guests to. I'm actually going on Saturday.
Oh, nice.
With the Yokums. With Oz Method and Missy J.
Oh,
they are.
Right. Yeah.
They are going to be visiting. They sometimes get to Colorado. They've got some family business here, seemingly about once a year. And we're going, and I can't wait. It's going to be so fun.
Oh, fantastic. We also visited the North Pole, which was a lot of fun. The kids had a great time. And
you guys hit the actual North Pole?
The North Pole, the amusement park place on the to Pikes Peak.
God, I had not heard it called that before.
Oh, did you not? Okay.
No, and I live here in Colorado.
That's quite a fun time. And then Pikes Peak, which was awesome, obviously. Really good fun.
Did you guys drive up?
Felt a little bit. Yeah, we did. I drove up. A little bit hairy, but not too bad. Mm-hmm. And then good fun at the top, but you definitely felt the height.
Oh yeah,
for sure. You felt how high you were, keenly. Yeah, no, that was great. But Colorado's a really enjoyable, and again, like the corner states, just there's a lot to like in that area of the world. We really enjoy the topographical differences that you get in those 4 states. They're all just a little bit different from the next one, and they've all got something really special about them, that really kind of keys them out from the other 3. Of course, Monument Valley is a cracker.
Well, I think we're gonna get one here.
I think you are.
Another good game. I believe that puts us at 2-1 U, correct?
That is correct, yes.
And here it comes in the same format.
I've been very errant. All right.
Yeah, so normally, during my normal stream, I'm paying a little more close attention, and I've got people in chat calling out misplays and stuff. It's very possible that tonight I've made a bunch. I'm enjoying the conversation and letting pretty much my unconscious,
I think you're allowed.
letting my unconscious play make the plays, and letting my conscious mind talk to you.
I'm fine with this arrangement. No, it's it's always a good chat, and that's what was really nice about coming into Colorado and meeting up with you, is that we had a great time. It was super easy. The results of the games didn't matter at all, and it was really enjoyable to meet you in person. As someone, because I've had my fair share of meeting members of the community. I used to play a lot of Guild Wars. If you've ever heard of that particular game.
I have.
A massively multiplayer online game, and I went to meet the leader of the guild I was in, and this is kind of I think we've been keeping it fairly PG-13, so it's not really something I can go into. How he greeted me at the door, it was one of the stranger experiences of my life to be greeted in such a way, where the first thing he mentioned was not something one would usually bring up between gentlemen. So yeah, you can meet all sorts, but meeting you, and actually again, I've met Yarboa, who's completely dominated me every time we played a game of cards, because Yarboa was on the island, and she's an absolute delight, Devon. And met up with Jen, Clever Missy, and Hannah Hobbs, Hobbs, who's hilarious. So, I've met a handful of players, and again, like, everyone's a delight. Like, no one I've met has not been anyone I would not love to hang out with in person on a regular basis.
You're hitting it on the head, and actually, this is part of the reason that I really wanted to have you on. You've met a handful, but really, do you really get to any conventions at all, Ryan, or not really? Is that really not possible right now, maybe with the family situation? And the reason I ask, I mean, that's where I think a lot of us have gotten to meet so many other community members in volume, and we very much walk away with the sentiment that you indicate. I think you come in expecting a certain past, because gamers sometimes do have some annoying things about them in our maybe other experience. And we find out that within our group, everyone and literally everybody that shows up is pretty cool. And you want to hang out with them more. Where can people get more access to you? Do you get to PAX up there?
It's funny, actually. I was planning on coming to Columbus this year, but that sadly got knocked squarely on the head But I actually, I have there's a not-for-profit society I'm involved with locally. We put on a small convention every year. Obviously, again, not this year, and we actually managed to grab Bax as a guest at one of our conventions. So Sam was kind enough to kind of show his face and provide kind of some streamer content to our group locally. And you know, Bax is, again, just a lovely fella, like a really genuinely a nice dude. There's not a bad bone in his body. He's always positive. Like there's so much to love about Sam. And so I met him, like having him as a guest because we chatted a bit, played some games. And so he was good enough to come up from Seattle to CovidCon, which is the convention that we run locally here most years. But yeah, getting out to some of the larger gaming conventions, like it would be easier if I didn't live on an island, because to get anywhere, we have to get a ferry to the mainland. And then we've got to get everywhere else. So, you know, if we were, say, living in Vancouver, driving to one of the conventions might be possible. But living on the island adds like a couple of $100 immediately to the trip.
Yeah.
Just getting on and off the island. So I don't get out too much right now. You know, that might change in the future. But it's, you know, we still live in a very digital age, so it's still possible. And actually through the COVID times, you know, a lot of the Twitch streams in the community kind of do the Jackbox stuff, and that's a lot of fun. Interacting with people in the community through Star Realms, but not purely. And that can be a really good time as well. And it's a really nice way of getting to know the people you play with, because ultimately, most of the time, our interactions in the group are through text. And, you know, text is an imperfect medium, you know? You get no inflection, you get no body language, you lose a lot of content in communication. And then you get on Zoom, and you're having a giggle with, I think, 5 or 6 other players, and it can really add to the fun and add to the feeling of community. But yeah, I don't tend to get out of the house a huge amount to conventions, and that's mostly geographical. You know, if I were smack plumb in the middle of Midwest America, I'm sure that would probably be much more of an achievement.
Yeah, I too was very disappointed. Was completely booked for Origins this year. And really, it's missing that this year. Real quick, I mean, mentioning Sam, absolutely, he is another direct influence as to why you and I are talking right now. He has been a huge inspiration as to why I'm suddenly interested in streaming. And, you know, Sarah made this very, very nice hat. Want to point that out as well. Sarah Tardashef. Yeah, love it. Little service that she provides to the community. If you guys want a knit cap with your IGN, contact Sarah Tardashef. But yeah, this particular year, having our conventions taken from us, that's part of the reason I really wanted to get this going. I know this by no means replaces that face-to-face interaction, but still getting access to you here, and that's kind of what I'm hoping to do with this show. I'm hoping that supplements a little bit for people, and I really hope to get to see you at a show next year.
Yeah, I mean, we'll have to see what happens. It's, you know, it's always dependent on many factors, but it's not beyond the will of man that happens. I was really looking forward to Origins. It was going to be a lot of fun. And so we'll see what next year looks like. You know, next year might be a bit too soon. It depends how this all plays out. And maybe next year can happen. And if not, then the year after. but yeah, it would be great to get together and have a good knees up again, because that was an enjoyable time, and to meet lots more people in the community, because there's, as we've said, a bunch of good people, you know.
Oops, I hit next game out of habit here.
Sorry?
Oh, I just hit next game and accidentally flipped to the next. Just talking to myself.
Oh. It's all right. I was playing Heloise for a hot minute while we were talking when this game first kicked off, and looked up and realized it wasn't the cutter, and was like, oh dang, I gotta get back to it. So what's your favorite of the expansions, Matt, and why? Like, which of the base sets, or which of the, and we've talked about missions, but which is the expansion that really draws you in?
So for me, I think long term, I really have been an aggro and scrap and damage guy. I'm perfectly comfortable, sometimes not buying any resource at all, and for me, that lends itself to Colony Wars. So Colony Wars, I think I would call my favorite base set right now. I really like the multicolored sets. I really like all of the multicolored chips and bases. So I think as a format, if I'm playing like some Colony Wars and all three multicolored, I can mix in some missions there or not. Right now, I'm kind of hot on missions. But yeah, I think the Fast and Furious, just going for the throat, that's kind of the Star Realms I still enjoy to this day.
It's interesting that you don't pick Frontiers there, because I find Frontiers to be a lot more aggressive.
More aggressive than Colony Wars?
And Colony Wars is Colony Wars is also my favorite base set, but I love it for its rich economy leverage, and I'm sure, and I'm going to call out Sandra Sullivan here, because that poor woman has been subject to more Leviathans than I think anyone has a right to be exposed to. I don't know what it is. Every time we play a game that has Colony Wars in it, not only does Leviathan turn up, it's almost always in my hand, and quite often through a means that is complete nonsense. So today, as an example, before we got on stream, I had a string of Frontiers events that brought a gunship to my hand and then allowed me to play and top Leviathan on about turn 2.
Wow.
And that shouldn't happen. And that's typical of games with Sandra, where it's absolute nonsense. But I guess Colony Wars, to an extent, is aggressive because it expedites those cards to hand. It expedites the game. But there's a lot you can do with a strong economy in Colony Wars as well. And I think that's, going back to the kind of the psychographics of Magic. Especially nowadays, I'm much more of a Timmy. I get excited by big swingy things. I want to see crazy events. I want to see a factory world topping something or putting something into play that's absolutely disgusting. And I don't mind getting beat down if the opportunity cost of that is putting a Leviathan in my hand, because that never feels bad. And I'll lose 3 games in a row. I have one where I do some nonsense.
That's Super Grandma, right? Is that the right person?
Sorry, yeah, Super Grandma is Sandra Sullivan. Yeah, Super Grandma, who is a delight in the community.
So I was made aware recently, I believe she might have the only documented turn 2 win to damage. I think that was posted here some time ago. That's wow, right?
That's certainly something to write home about. That's not something you see every day. I mean, you can keep your unicorns. A turn 2 damage victory is surely the cherry on top.
I mean, that's obviously it does require some help, but to still be able to recognize kind of what's going on, make the plays that you need to during those turns. I mean, it's still a thing for sure.
And that's actually the missions. When I enjoy missions the most is that decision, that pivot point where, and it might be your starting hand and you look at your missions, and it might be turn 7 or even turn 19 if the game's going very long, but it tends not to with missions as much. That pivot point where you think, this is a game where I have to go for damage because I am not confident in my ability to get my missions flowing, and I have to beat my opponent down before they complete the game by missions, because they clearly are going to do so before I can. And that's a really interesting opportunity cost, because it will change your buying again. You know, missions already changes how you buy, but then if you try to transition to a normal aggressive game, then you're switching that mentality. And it speaks back to what you were saying earlier on, which is you can't autopilot missions. Like every decision is an active decision, and it's an interesting tie into other, like the endurance tournament that Rick runs. You know, every decision matters. Every choice, every sliver can have a huge effect, because you have a game where you take a bit more damage in the first round than you could have done. You could have avoided it. Or you pull a Madden Mondays and you don't use that hero and then you get blown out. That can hurt you in round 7 and knocking you out by 2 endurance. You could have saved by popping that hero in your first game for 4 authority. And it's that piece that ties back every decision at every turn matters. And there are formats that really put that into perspective much more starkly. And I think we're about to do it, people. I think this is the Leviathan to hand that we were talking about. This is why we play Star Realms. Right here. This is the nonsense that we crave. Sorry, not sorry.
I know.
Oh dear. But yeah, it's the push pull of that conscious unconscious thought that can make games really interesting. And the reason why the likes of Rick and Tatiana and yourself and several other players are playing tens of thousands of games. There is no way, apart from maybe the craziest of Magic players, to tie it back to another card game, that people are achieving that number of games in any one particular game. I mean, there's that saying about 10,000 hours of something before you become an expert, and it's talking about 10,000 hours of like informed feedback. Not just doing something for 10,000 hours. You could do something really badly for 10,000 hours and not become an expert. But that informed feedback really allows you to have that experience, and with 25, 35, 40,000 games under your belt, that ties back into that unconscious thought where you can recognize those situations and you can have an understanding of what the best decision looks like without thinking about it too much. But wait, there's a new expansion, and now you have to reevaluate everything, because maybe these cards that have come out interface with the game really differently, and now that decision that you would make 99 times out of 100, you just have to think about it a little bit more, because maybe it's horribly wrong. And the fact that the game does keep changing in that way is is really healthy. And it's not a, sometimes with collectible card games, it can feel really forced. It can feel like, the sets are being churned out to keep people buying things. And actually, every set that releases so far, at least with Star Realms, has felt like they're substantially adding something to the game. It's not just a kind of a buy more stuff. It's interesting additions, it's interesting content, and it allows for the game to be played in lots of different ways. Star Realms is a fairly basic game, but in its inception, and yet you can play it in so many different ways, and the community keeps coming up with new ways to interact with it, and that's one of the joys. That's why we keep coming back for so many games, because it keeps us interested and keeps coming at our preferences from different angles, and that prevents us becoming bored and stale with it, because there's always something new.
Yeah, not only with what White Wizard offers us in terms of sets and formats, but with community implemented tournaments like Endurance Challenge, like Dodgeball. It forces you to look at your whole evaluation differently. And we talked about Colony Wars. I'll be upfront about, pretty much since Colony Wars, I have darn near written Blue off. I mean, I just tend to now really storm towards red, green, yellow, scrap, damage, and now with differential and missions, I'm forced to sort of re-welcome Blue back in, sometimes over the things that I'm normally used to just putting such huge priority in, like scrap and damage during missions. Instead, I'm looking for a little bit of time and some card draw, some tricks. And it is such a nice change of pace after so many games to sort of reevaluate and say, let's actually spend some time doing something different.
Yeah, I think I definitely agree with that. The certainly with the missions piece, having the modular options in your hand to interact with the missions in a favorable way, especially if there are invaders involved, where things can come at you at a quick pace, and you can all of a sudden complete that diversify when you didn't think you had any chance of doing it, because boom, there's a bit of extra damage, or there's some life come off the road. But like with regards to Colony Wars, the Blue, there are some bad. And Trade Hauler is staring at me right now and kind of mocking me. Trade Hauler and Cargo Pod are very similar cards in the sense that, in general, they're bad cards. In general. But on turn 1 or 2, they can be a very strong purchase. And they can, because that 3 trade is a huge game changer to making sure you can get 6 or 7 in your hand on the next deck. But later on in the game, when they're stuck in your hand doing absolutely nothing, they can be such an unfortunate waste of time. And so Blue definitely loses in that regard. And I'm gonna do what I said. Look, I've just bought a bad card, because now I'm gonna get my favorite card. Because I'm a sucker for punishment. But it's that I know I'm buying a bad card. I know I probably shouldn't do it, but at the same time, if I lose this game, I've just lost it, and I've got Peacekeeper and Leviathan in my hand. So already you've played really well. I don't really care, because those cards are brilliant and they feel really good in the deck.
I think this is
but
going.
The blue cards in Colony Wars good are great. Like the good blue cards are fantastic. But the dross is really bad.
There's just a lack of damage symbols in in Colony Wars Blue. And I get it. I mean, that's not what they decided to do with Blue and Colony Wars. You know, I mean, the other sets have so much. And I find this sometimes, yeah, in Colony Wars, if I'm just going Colony Wars alone or a Colony Wars based some other expansions, you know, I'll probably grab one blue card just simply because, like you said, there's good opportunity in the resource that it offers. You know, but then I'll move on to scrapping damage.
Yeah. Like Peacekeeper, for an example, and this is I can't remember which Megapooling article, if even it is a Megapooling article it refers to, but like there are cards that are colours, but they're not really that colour. So Peacekeeper is an example. Yes, it is a blue card. It gives you authority, but it's actually also a very aggressive card because it's smashing your opponent in the face for 6, and you know, sometimes drawing a card. Bounty Hunter is another very similar card. 7 damage on a 5-drop is great, and okay, sometimes you hit the authority, and that's wonderful. If you're playing an aggressive game, like, you don't care if you never hit that authority, because the 7 damage piece is really strong.
It is.
And so sometimes we can do ourselves a disservice by looking at the cards just for their color, and it's that part of the. And this is what I liked about the article. I can't remember exactly which one it was, but it was talking about. It might have been, and you know what? It might have been Benjatron. It might have been Benjatron's article on Board Game Geek about vanilla, and that was one of the. That gave me a huge paradigm shift in my performance. You know, red beats blue, beats blue green. Beats yellow green. But not necessarily thinking only about the colors of the cards, but the function of the cards that you're buying. Because there are plenty of cards that can fulfill those archetypal roles that are not in those colors. Convoy Bot being a great example. Yeah, it's a red card, and it scraps. It's so good on damage. Like three coin for 4 damage and maybe 6. Like, it's a super aggressive card, and it scraps from anywhere. Like, that might be the best card in Colony Wars.
Yeah. I mean, I think I struggle between it, Ravager, and Lancer. Those are, to me, my. And honestly, if you can start landing those early, I mean, it's, to me, one of the few contexts where you can go entirely baseless. In other situations, I'm looking to have just a couple, you know, just something to get in the way, just enough. But yeah, the aggro power in Colony Wars, the efficiency of the damage. It's hot. It's so fast, and yeah, I like Frontiers too. It's weird. I think I got a soft spot for Colony Wars though.
Because Crusher in Frontiers is, you know, you're trading that row control of Ravager for the potential coin. But 6 damage on 3 trade, like, it's so good. And the speed with which those little yellow cards can get you through that deck. And yellow's probably the color I buy the least of, I think.
Interesting.
Which was a real wake up call in Frontiers, because I was getting hammered left, right, and center because yellow was so good. You know, buying those looting cards that just cycle you through the deck. I looked at blue. We talk about blue being kind of not necessarily wonderful in Colony Wars. I think Frontiers has some real blue traps as well. And yellow's probably one of the better colors by some margin. And I know Daryl, DG3, is, you know, a real connoisseur of Frontiers. To the point where I think he had a realization that if players he considered to be excellent players were asking him for Frontiers advice. Like, maybe he was pretty good at Frontiers. But he really is. Like, if you beat Daryl in a game of Frontiers, you've done very well yourself, because he has played so many Frontiers games. He plays the deck so well, that trying to get the best of him in that one is a real challenge.
I did have the pleasure recently of playing both Gesslers in a dodgeball sort of pickup, help teach me how it works match. And yeah, Shannon is getting really, really, really good too. So it's... In fact, during that match, I had more success against Daryl than I did against Shannon. So that was a lot of fun. And yeah, no doubt. I hadn't quite realized that he had the experience in that format specifically. But yeah, no, I'm not at all surprised to hear. I mean, I've heard other people just say, I don't know how to beat Daryl. And yeah, I love our games. We have tremendous games. When he came in, I started hitting him a lot, and wow, super enjoyable games.
Well, Daryl and John Lowe, I had the pleasure of having them in a dodgeball team with me. And those two bounce off each other so well, and Daryl's so hungry and knowledge and to get better. And he's also just one of the nicest guys. And watching those two interact, and this is one of the again, the formats we play, the games we play, dodgeball being a team format, and with 6 or 7 of you put together, and it creates like a micro community, and seeing the interactions with people that you wouldn't necessarily go out of the way to be in a group with, because you don't know them from a bar of soap. And then you get to know them, and they're hilarious or thoughtful or thought-provoking. Some of the chats we had in Dodgeball for Hire just about cards, it was eye-opening to hear people's perspectives about stuff. It's just we had Errol, John, Jim, with 3 amazing players, and some of the things they came out with, I was just like, well, I'd never thought of that. Okay, that's a layer, 3 layers below where my thought process was. And often it was John coming out with something he blew my mind. I was like, you know what? That's why he beats me more often than I beat him.
And John being Tuna Slap, am I correct?
That is correct. John being the slappiest of tuners, yeah.
We early in the Mega Holland days, we used to use Tuna Slap as a verb. It became that was a definitive win, a real slap. And I went looking for John to see if we could find him, and it took a while to get him in, but we're so happy to have him in the group. So Ryan, we are right now, after the delay at the beginning, we are at 2 hours. So what I'm going to let you know is that I'm happy to keep going. I'm happy to do another game, but you are at this point at the end of your commitment. So I'm enjoying our chat. At the same time, it's getting late, especially Eastern. What would you like to do? Do you want to run one more? What do you want to do?
Well, look, Matt, it's my Friday, and I've got beer. So, look, this decision needs to be yours to make, because I'm having a lot of fun. I'm more than happy to play, but I don't have to get up for work tomorrow. And
I took off for tomorrow. I gotta, again, Yokums are coming in, so I'm looking forward to that. Why don't we?
Sounds like we're playing enough time then.
Yeah, let's do this. You're up 3-1. I mean, if you end up with 2, that wraps up our best of 9 anyway. So why don't we set up for another best of 3, and then we'll call it. And we'll add that to our best of 9. I mean, that contributes to our best of 9. But this will at least give the listeners, people looking and watching in an idea of when we're gonna wrap.
Sounds good. Do you want to choose the format?
I guess yeah. I sent the last two. You sent the first two. Why don't you go ahead and pick it out?
All right. Let's. I went with my home turf to begin with. I feel like we want some nonsense because I do like me some nonsense, but no, not those ones. No, not that one. Okay, we will go. We'll go with some promo missions nonsense and frontiers.
All right. So I think with missions in play and the fact that we talked about that we probably need to be a little more conscious with missions, we can maybe try to talk a little bit about the game itself. I've loved that we've ventured off into other topics. This is what I wanted this program to be. But with missions, why don't we talk a little bit about what we're doing? And maybe that will help some people.
Okay. Well, I'm going to be open and honest with my missions, just for the benefits of the viewers. I'm sitting on Convert, Dominate, and Unite. So we're looking at bases. I think on that basis, Frontier Hawk is a very hard card to turn down at the best of times. Cycles through your deck. And we've got Dominate, so that's a nice fit. And based on the fact we've got Convert and Unite, I feel like Defense Bot is a no-brainer.
All right, in the interest of fairness and respecting what you just did, I am sitting on Armada. And without Gambits, that's going to be a little bit tougher. Mm-hmm. We're sitting on Monopolize. So we need a trade-fed pairing, ship and base. And of course, we're sitting on Ally. So I think starting off, boy, without Gambits, Armada's a lot tougher.
It definitely hinders the completion of that one. You know, Armada, it's interesting, isn't it? Because Armada is one of the prerequisites to a unicorn, almost always. And that's in the unicorn format. That's because you can draw two as player two and you get it done straight away. It's without the events or the gambits, it pushes you towards certain colors if you want to try and complete that one. Now, where do you stand, Matt, on the idea that missions should contribute to a small bonus but not end the game in victory if you complete all three? Because that's a sentiment that keeps coming up in the community every now and then, isn't it?
So I think what I like in what they've created, I don't know that necessarily everyone perceives yet. If you are going for missions and your opponent is going for damage, what you've effectively got is a game with asymmetric win conditions. Not so much just an alternative win condition, but going a step further. We're playing at different objectives. And that's something that is not easy to achieve balance-wise for a game maker. We're starting to see a little more of that out in the board game world. I mean, one of my favorite games that I really didn't get to play much because there's not a lot of people playing it in my area, and I don't know that it has an online presence, is the Star Wars Living Card Game. And it was the very first that I realized, oh my God, we're doing completely different things here to win the game, but we're still playing with the same cards. And that was somewhat profound to me. And I think that's what White Wizard has been able to successfully implement here. And in that, I really respect it. I mean, that to me says a lot. And again, I hadn't quite opened my mind to that until somewhat recently. I went in and watched Brian stream and realized, to the extent that he's committing, that he's abandoning the damage race in situations, and has a completely different valuation. It really has opened up me to missions, and I'm going to spend about a month or so really pounding them in queue.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's the I definitely, going back to that conscious thought of missions, I definitely have that in the forefront of my mind on when I'm playing a missions game, like how quickly can I pin myself into either I'm damage or I'm missions, or I'm still able to straddle both of those victory conditions until I have to plump for one of them. And it's a real push-pull sometimes. Because sometimes you look at your missions, you're like, and you look at the starting row, and you just think, there is absolutely no way on this clean earth I'm going to get 3 different ships and 3 different bases before my opponent completes their 3 missions. And so how can I move quickly to try and win? And it's always super interesting. So I'm going to pick up Merc Cruiser here, because in missions games, especially with Unite, that's such a powerful card. And Stinger, it's going to push me towards more damage.
So you point exactly to it. I think that's the struggle, is figuring out when it's plausible and when you need to abandon it. I think it is those 3 where you have the 3 specific bases and ships. That's probably the worst case scenario. Do you agree?
Yeah, if I've ever had that scenario, I've always felt like, and I can probably count on the fingers of half a hand the amount of times it's worked out for me. That I've won a missions game with those 3 missions by missions. And it's usually because my opponent has an horrendous mixture of cards from their deck that's kind of stymied them from achieving their missions. So not only have they got unlucky, I've also got quite lucky. But it feels like, and also missions makes it, there's early on, you're told kind of never leave a base in play. And then as you kind of go through the motions of playing games, getting a bit more experience, you realize that actually sometimes the aggro race requires you to leave the bases in play that aren't outposts, ignore them, and push damage to face, because you are, and this is going back to the Game Magic the Gathering article by Mike Flores, Who's the Beatdown, which I'm sure you'll know. And that kind of talks about, in any given game, and it's talking about Magic, but really it can talk about any deck building game, any collectible card game. Someone is going to be the player who wants to end the game quickly, and someone is going to be the player who wants to end the game much later, so that they can leverage the advantage they're building in their deck. And I find it super interesting that you can see that in Star Realms in the kind of the mid to late experience, where leaving bases in play is the right thing to do, because the 5 damage that you would have spent getting rid of that 1 trade edition base is gonna get your opponent dead before they can leverage the advantage that economy gives them in the following deck. And then missions pops up and switches it all back around and says, oh, you didn't want to leave any bases in play? That's crazy talk. And it's that constant push-pull between what is the right thing to do on any given situation. And that's kind of, I think that's why I never get bored of Star Realms. Because there's always interesting decisions. And especially with all the formats we have available to us now, it's quite rare that you can come across a decision in a complex grouping of sets that is definitely 100% correct.
So I'm not having a ton of luck here.
So we are going to
kind of working towards completing
we are going to complete Unite.
Slowly working towards my ally and my armada.
Yeah, we're going to get Unite here. And the breeding site's going to be a problem. Although, with Armada and Ally, you're taking lots of bases to get the Ally, and that's going to hurt your Armada, so I'm quite happy about that.
Yeah, normally with Gambits, I kind of hope and assume now I can figure out Armada separately or through Chaos. I've got to sort of manufacture it here.
And it's every base you take is another dagger in the heart of Armada, but at the same time, it's a real playoff sometimes between. And I found myself taking bases for one mission, knowing that my life is going to be hell to try and complete Armada, unless I get super lucky or can stack up some draws. And it's the push-pull sometimes of, and going back to kind of your comment earlier about it's when you've got those 3 base ship missions that's the hardest. It can be, but sometimes, when you've got 3 missions that really don't play well together with the trade row specifically, you feel like you have to take a base because your opponent's buying up all the green, which kind of maybe indicates they've got to exterminate and can't let them have as many of them. But then that's putting you behind getting your Armada. And it's always interesting decisions in the push-pull of seeing if you can, is negative, it's like negative politics. Does negative purchasing hurt you more than it hurts your opponent? Because sometimes the answer is yes. I find that deeply interesting when it comes to the gameplay, because sometimes you think you're doing a really good job preventing your opponent getting their mission, and all of a sudden your deck is filled with rubbish, and you've actually only hurt your own goals. I am going to practice what I preach here, and I'm going to ignore your breeding site because I think I win this race by damage.
That's not good. Yeah. So one thing I have noticed in that. So let me kind of explain. In the beginning of the week, I decided I was going to force missions. So the very first day, I wasn't even considering going into a damage race. I was like, we're just going to do this no matter what. And I ran off a serious good day, 17 of 21 in the ranked queue. But, in doing that a little bit since, not only am I losing sometimes to other people doing the same thing and just beating me to the missions race, but I am realizing, nope, especially when you do get maybe the 3 specific faction pairings, that is probably not a winning race. But what I have noticed with formats where there's a ton of events and heroes and other chaos things giving me non-manufactured, and when I say that, I mean stuff I don't have to run through my discard pile. Free resource, free damage, free card draw to help me do tricks and set up topping, all those things that help me do my missions. I feel like those things actually favor the missions player who's waiting for them a little more than the damage player. Do you agree?
Oh, I 100% agree in like the trademark unicorn format. Obviously favors missions. Otherwise, Brian wouldn't have chosen those sets to try and deliberately force the mission victory. But there's so many knobs that the deck can throw at you to tweak to help you get one of your missions that it definitely. And look, I've still lost games to aggro when it's been a heavy gambit event world. I feel like there's definitely probably a 55-45 minimum lean, and obviously that's a terribly scientific statistic towards missions in that scenario. I'd go so far as to say maybe it's 2/3 to 1/3 the games I win by missions or lose by damage, or win by damage or lose by missions. I think it's probably 66% in favor of missions in those scenarios where the sets we're playing with are very conducive to, as you say, the free resources that can help you complete what you need to.
Yeah,
and you haven't triggered any base. So even though I know what you've got, I don't know what you've got. So I'm just going to continue to pump damage to face because I feel confident that you don't have any base shenanigans going on.
Yeah, catching those exploits and the thing that, again, I mean, is going to make those top players a little better just categorically at Star Realms, missions of course included, is all that awareness, not only of all the abilities to top and to exploit, but also, anticipating use of the mission benefits themselves. It is such a huge thing where coming in as just the aggro scrap player, I stumble into mission games and I'm finding some of those triggers just happening spontaneously because I'm completing missions in spite of myself. And I do realize like I've been missing so many opportunities because sometimes I don't think about using a base before I'm going to have the opportunity to bounce it because maybe I just didn't anticipate that mission coming. But their awareness of all of that is really what allows them to succeed, and that's what I'm working on and hoping to get better at over the next month.
I think it's a really good lesson for any player in that regard, regardless of whether you have a love or hate relationship with missions. Is that those slivers matter so much? It might feel like such a small decision, and I think I got rather lucky here, because you had plenty of damage in your deck that you could have drawn, and luckily did not. But the small decisions can really add up to the end result. And again, like not anticipating the use of those events, like, oh, there's X amount of free economy in the events that are coming up in this game, potentially. I can probably skip buying this card that doesn't help my missions and maybe buy something bigger. Or scrap is a great one, especially where heroes are concerned. Heroes and events almost devalue, certainly in the more restrictive types of scrap cards, devalues scrap a little bit. Like a convoy bot is always a convoy bot, and it's great, and you always buy it, it's wonderful. If you've got heroes, united heroes, and events in play, maybe you don't buy that repair bot because, quite frankly, you've got just as much chance getting a Hartman or a Morris or something else that can scrap a card or two. And the Pebble actually is less likely to scrap a card for you into a mid game. But yeah, it's always interesting.
Why don't you send that challenge just to make sure we get the sets correct? Yeah, good game. Nice job. Yeah, had it in hand, of course. Although, I mean, I didn't complete a single mission. Should be said. Go figure.
Yeah, and I only got the one. And that can happen so much. But that's, there's luck involved there too. I went for damage, and ultimately, and this is where that it's very challenging sometimes with that kind of that view of the what I bottomed and what I topped. It's in very close games, it can feel like it's literally just I bottomed my damage, I lost, and maybe that's what happened. If the game wasn't close, it wouldn't have mattered. The fact that what you bottomed mattered meant that it was a really close game. And sometimes the focus goes on, I was so unlucky. But actually it was kind of the focus could be on, that was such a close game, it could have gone either way. And that's kind of, I don't know, I sometimes I'm very optimistic and try to look on the bright side in everything. And I find for me that's super healthy. But kind of tying that back to salt and that, when you're not a good opponent, sometimes I've found that the players who actually are on the better end of the scale are the ones who get a little bit extra salty because they're pushing themselves so hard. And they've got such high expectations, and they give themselves such a hard time when it doesn't come up. And because they give themselves such a hard time, they're always looking to make the best decisions, and they're not like me, who'll be just like, haha, I'm going to buy a battle screecher. I haven't even looked at my missions. I love this card. So, that's kind of, it comes back to understanding what you want from the game. And in that article where I kind of wrote, it's really important to not necessarily care about what other people are doing as much, because maybe that's not your goal, or that's not the playground you want to be in. Don't look at what other people are doing. Mind yourself. Mind what you want to do, and care about what you're trying to achieve. Now that I bought a battle screecher without really paying attention to what I'm doing, let's see if it can help me or not. Okay, so we've got ally, convert, and unite. So that's not a total wash. Having bought the thing that blows up the row because I love blowing up the row, I'm going to take a blob screecher because that gets us towards unite and towards ally. And we're going to take the cargo hauler because draw is good and unite is good.
Now, what's interesting about this Merc garrison, in general, I mean, the Mercs are super helpful with missions, and yet the garrison isn't. Now, I am sitting on defend, so I need outposts. I'm sitting on rule and influence as well. So I need bases, and then I need a splashing of some different ships.
It's not factioned.
I kind of want to take it to hit my outposts, but yeah, you're right. It doesn't really help as much.
If you had ally, then it can help very much there.
It's true. I'm forgetting, I think, that goes towards ally, but they are ally triggers.
They are, but yeah, the factionless nature of Merc garrison, as opposed to the ships, which become a faction and therefore count, is a subtle difference. And so we drew a Viper, which is not what we were looking for. but we're going to continue to... If I pop the cargo launch to get Burrower, it moves me further away from Unite. I think we're going to blow up the entire row first, including Burrower, to see what pops up. And this is why I love Battle Screecher so much.
I was kind of eyeing up that fortress.
Oh, yeah. I have a compulsive need to blow up the row with Battle Screecher. In fact, it's really only in like the tightest of games that maybe I care about. So if it's even SRPC, like I might blow up the row and not care what happened. But maybe Pan Galactic League, maybe because I finally, after I think it's the third attempt, made it from Nebula Minor League into Pan Galactic League. I was very proud of that. So in a Pan Galactic League game, maybe I might consider exactly what I scrapped with Battle Screecher to try and maximize my ability to win a game. But outside of that, you best believe I'm blowing up the road. That's just a lot of fun. And we've got Unite, so we'll take a card I don't really like, Frontier Runner. And why not build a bot as well? So we're buying cards we don't really want to try and get Unite.
Frontier Runner, Storage Silo, Trade Wheel. These are cards that, in my typical scrap and damage mindset, I don't look at hardly at all. Yet when you add in the missions, suddenly those cards have value, and it's kind of weird for me.
See, Trade Wheel I quite like, because it's got a 5 shield on it, and it comes back to one of the mantras of, like, allow your opponent to make mistakes. Because if a Trade Wheel's in play, one economy is not doing you a huge amount of good, but can get you to that 6 cost, maybe. But if they hit it down, 5 damage saved, that's a pretty good save.
It's fair.
And actually, if you get 2 of them, they're actually quite a threat. You know, they're pumping out 2 trade for damage, and you've got to have 10 to get rid of them both. The ship, Frontier Runner, 2 trade, 2 authority. It does not complete diversify on its own. Is one of the biggest problems for it. Storage Silo, however, does. And is therefore, for my money, a much better card. Oh no, Storage Silo doesn't. It's still 2 authority, isn't it? It's 3 damage to get rid of it.
Yes.
But if you don't get rid of Storage Silo on 1 turn, and you let it live another turn, it's gained them 4 authority. And you could have got rid of it for 3 damage. So it's that again. That's another card that really plays into the allow your opponents to make mistakes. I appear to have lost thread of what I was doing now. Well, we're going to take Assault Pod because that's a great card, and now we're going to take Base to try and get our ally going.
Okay, so continuing to try to work my base angle for both defend and rule, I do need to grab a... Well, we did grab that Merc, so my influence, I think, down the line is looking okay. We do need to still get these bases. Now, I'm a little conflicted. I could go the long hauler for a bit of a longer base strategy. But I think in the interest of just getting bases so we can complete them as quickly as possible, We're going to grab that market. Doesn't help us, obviously, in defend, but it does get us a little further towards rule.
Well, I have some good news for you, which is that outpost is staying heavily in play.
That is great news for me.
I thought you'd be happy about that one. I'm going to take Merc Cruiser because damage and the ability to beat any card is great. And then, to be honest, I think I'm interested in Light Cruiser to try and leverage some draw, maybe. We'll see.
So, trying to practice what I preached a little bit earlier, I'm going to actually pay attention this time to what I realize will be a mission completion in defend, and recognize that I will get to bounce one of these bases to hand. Now, in this case, there's not really any activation to be done with the defense system. So, not a ton. I guess what I'll consider instead is what I'm going to end up buying.
It's just such a shame because in paper, you would be able to scrap a card with Mercenary Garrison, activate the mission, bounce it, and scrap a card again.
Mm-hmm.
Such is life.
They
I
had
understand why that's
yeah, they had to write a lot of lines there, figuring out what was going to go in the app slightly different. Ooh.
Yeah, I think it's fine. I think you do always lose a little bit of one way or the other. You'll lose some functionality of play. It's like making a movie out of a book. Like, it doesn't always quite work out exactly how you want it to, but it's still probably good, with some glaring exceptions. But you, my friend, have gone heavy bases, and I am very interested in blowing them all up.
That Obliterator is still one of my favorite cards ever.
Oh, it's so good. I still can't. The damage is not going to help me get rid of either of your bases, but those are both somewhat weak cards.
Tell me more.
And unlikely to achieve ally next turn. So I think I'm going to get rid of the trade pod, just to get rid of it from the next deck, to be honest.
All right, our bases lived again.
Mm-hmm.
There we go.
Sometimes.
There we go. And now we can just look at grabbing ships, because now we just need to finish influence, and we got 2 mercs. We're feeling good.
See, that's what you just did was a classic body language move of a Magic player who knows they're about to win a game. It was that all of a sudden you sit up a bit more straight in your chair, you adjust your position, you lean in, you are now keenly interested in the next couple of hands because you can smell the victory.
Ryan just called me out for absolute awful poker face.
But that's part of reading your opponent and playing a game. Like, I've got the benefit of being able to see the stream of you playing, right? So if this was digital, that's a feed I wouldn't have.
No, listen, I really respect that's something you think about. You know, one of the things that blew my mind when they talked to Amanda Storm after an epic finals appearance, you know, they asked her, you don't ever look at your hand until your opponent's done with their turn. Why is that? And that's what she said. She goes, I don't want to give away any indication. I don't want to look at a card that I'm considering buying. I don't want to give a reaction. And I thought, holy crap, that's a different level. And to think that you'd be able to draw something similar here looking at me on stream. That's an awareness that I really wasn't aware of, and absolutely, yeah, I want to give you a reaction. It's not occurring to me that you might exploit it.
Well, I mean, I'm not sure there's a great deal I can do about it in this scenario, but yeah, it's still information. But I think at this stage of the game, with you on the cusp of mission victory, it's also not a terribly clever read because you're ahead. I'm nowhere near the damage race, so I need to get very lucky. And this is the sort of lucky I need to see. All right. So there's the unite.
Oh boy.
Yes, I do have the problem though that I have another 2 hands before I can complete a mission. So still probably game over. But
Well, of my 12 cards in the draw, 5 are starters. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 will complete my 3rd mission. Since we don't have any yellow and we're just looking to send 3 different ships, we're going to call yellow, in fact, on that. And there
rewarded.
It is. Wait, am I? Oh no, Ryan! I totally
I was the one with Unite.
mistook influence for Unite, didn't I?
You did.
And though I'm not minding chat, I have a feeling they're going to be
But they are going bonkers right now.
merciless and call out my misplay. The full game long-term misplay. Oh no, this is awful.
Oh, do you have another red in your hand just to exacerbate the issue?
This is awful.
I mean, whilst, well, there was a low percentage chance you could have drawn another red.
Oh, is it going to cost? I mean, I don't want to say, I mean, is it going to cost me? I don't know how much I played to the wrong effect. That's just what I drew. But my hopes were certainly up. I thought the game was over.
Right.
Okay, so it is, in fact, well, red or blue. I think that we'd be... Well, I guess there's no sense.
You definitely want to get rid of Borrower.
Yeah, well, I'm deciding if I want to, use it for the... And then maybe even another will flip. Hey, it did. Look at that. Oh, another flipped. Will we live to see them connect? That is the question.
So we have to get rid of your base because you can influence next turn. We can, which is good. And then we're gonna buy that blob bot and we're gonna force that shuffle. And of course, the one card that we didn't want to draw to leave it exposed to damage is the base.
Well, I guess what we need to do is at least scrap and get us one last chance if we're even afforded that. Green or yellow? I guess it's going to be yellow, actually.
It's a free draw, so you would definitely take it. Oh,
I'll tell you now.
That,
you got to do it now.
Well, I'm not so sure I've got the guns, but we're going to give it a good go. We're going to come up short, but it'll be as close as we can make it. We'll go through the motions of scrapping because it could but won't matter. And we'll knock you down to 17 and expect the victory next turn.
Well, I will save a little face here with my chat by completing that mission for the win.
Good game.
Good game, sir. Ryan, I think here at 1 Eastern, I think we're going to call it. Cool with that?
I think that's very reasonable. Yeah, absolutely.
I cannot thank you enough. This has been tremendous. I hope that people listening have also found it beneficial. I'm going to pretty much put it out there that someday down the line, I'm going to ask you to come on again. And we're going to figure out the video next time. And we're going to figure out the video for next week, hopefully. And I thank you once again just so much for taking the time, having this excellent conversation, all of your insight pertaining to Star Realms, life in general, positivity, everything that is Ryan Powell.
Look, Matt, thank you for having me on. It's been an absolute pleasure. It was great to meet you in Colorado and play some physical games together and chat there. And it's been just as much fun to chat and shoot the breeze tonight. So yeah, I hope people found it, if not useful, then at least enjoyable. And yeah, I'd love to come on again and just spend some time chatting about things. It's been a blast.
And I want to thank everyone else as well, everyone in chat, anyone that may have come across this on a YouTube replay. We're going to do this every week, guys. Every week we're going to have a new guest. I'm going to announce, I did announce, in fact, already on last week's regular stream that next week we're going to have Jeremy Folletta. Jeremy Folletta is RIP, W-R-I-P. I've had continuous games with Jeremy Folletta since the very first summer of Star Realms, 2014. And we have actually branched out and played other games. That's going to be a blast. I'm looking forward to that. Also, catch me on Wednesday night, guys, for regular challenges, narrated play, chat participation. That's going to do it. Ryan, thank you so much. We are out. Everyone have a good night.